Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Careers in Changemaking. Careers in Changemaking is a series of live interviews brought to you by the communications team of the European Activism Incubator. Our aim is to showcase what careers exist in the impact sector for those who want to make their daily work, their daily life mean something and bring positive change to our lives and our societies. We include nonprofit sectors, civil society sectors, social entrepreneurships, but also creative sectors, as you will see next week. We invite experts and people who have experience in the field to tell you how they have to showcase what jobs exist in the sectors, and also so that they can tell you the insider tips of how they have built up their careers. And so today, I have the great pleasure to welcome Yannick Bousse, my former colleague, actually, and an expert in urban mobility, who is currently working at the International Association of Public Transport as a senior manager for knowledge and innovation. Hi, Yannick.
Hello, Paulina. Thank you very much for the invitation today.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. And I'm very interested in talking about careers and change making. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for joining us. So how about we start from talking about the organization you are currently working for and what you do, and then we will go back and sort of try to explore a little bit the last 10 years of how you have been building up this career. So tell me a little bit about what is the International Association of Public Transport, in short, UITP.
Sure. So UITP, as you said, is the International Association of Public Transport. And what it really is a worldwide network of all public transport stakeholders and also sustainable transport stakeholders. And what this does is it brings together a community of around 1,800 members which are in this network. And it's also, as I say, a worldwide organization with members of over 100 countries. We also have a wide network of offices with 16 different offices around the world. And what we're really trying to do with this network is to share knowledge between all these different companies and these different members, advocate for sustainable transport also to worldwide organizations such as the United Nations, and also the networking part of it, so bringing these members together so they can learn and share from each other also.
Mm-hmm. So this is important for things like air quality and quality of life in the cities, right? The public transport. And I think it's interesting to talk about generally about associations, because here in Brussels, there's so many of them, European associations or international associations, and UITP is one example. And when you say a member, who is actually a member of UITP?
Sure. So we represent the entire public transport and urban mobility community and sector, basically. So this could be a public transport operator. For example, here in Brussels, you would have STIP or MEVB, which is really operating the network of buses, trams, metro, etc. Or it could be something as an authority, which is then kind of between the operator and the city level, who is then setting out the strategy for public transport. Something such as a Transport for London in the UK also, who is then also doing the strategy part of it also. We also have the manufacturers and industries, so constructors also, for example, Volvo buses, these are Mercedes buses, these are manufacturers, but also the academics also, so university transport departments in universities, these are also part of our network.
Okay.
And I just also want to, yes.
This is the place where everybody who works on public transport can meet, basically, and have all these discussions.
Exactly. We bring together all these different types of stakeholders so we can talk about the benefits of sustainable transport and public transport. Also, for example, public transport, the reasons why we have such a network and the reasons why we promote public transport. Every year, public transport can save large amounts of CO2 emissions, improve air quality. It's also an accelerator for the economy, job creation, social inclusion. It brings people into the community where they need to be in cities also. And it also promotes active and healthy lifestyles. People walk to and for public transport stations. They're more likely to walk, to cycle also when they use public transport.
Yes, absolutely. I'm lucky to live in a very well-connected place in Brussels, and I don't need to have a car, and I absolutely love it. And I hope this could be possible for every person in every point where they're living in the city. So for those who are watching, you can ask questions to Yannick. You can just type them, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. You can just type them in comments, and we will see them here, and we will try to address them. But now I'm going to ask you, Yannick, so as the Senior Manager of Knowledge and Innovation, what is your role in this organization? And I understand that the first thing that you do is manage the Sustainable Development Committee. Is this correct?
That's right. So what we're doing basically in this role of knowledge and innovation is trying to work together with our members. These are really our deepest source of knowledge, basically, is our membership. These are the ones who are really implementing the latest innovations, the latest technology. These are the people who are doing the work. So what we're trying to do is basically work together with them, for example, in this committee related to sustainable development, and try to basically extract different knowledge and different innovations, technologies, best practices taking place across the world. So we can basically centralize this and put it together in different forums, which we can then share even more widely through the network.
Okay, so this is about all these people learning from each other. So different, for instance, transport companies learning about different things people are doing in another country, right?
Exactly. So if member, say in Germany, Berlin, implements or does a new types of best practice, we can then take those learnings, put it, say, into a report or an event, a conference or a training, and then the wider community can also learn from this. And so that's the benefit of having such a network. We can take the best practice, also sometimes even what doesn't work, and then we can then synthesize this, put this into a way that is easily communicatable, and also how we can disseminate this throughout the network so that others in other countries, in other regions can also learn from these practices.
Yeah, and I think this is a perfect example of generally how the associations at the European and international level, excuse me, at the European and international levels work, because whoever is a member of this kind of associations, whether it's public authorities or whether it's non-profit organizations, one of their key activities will be to basically do the mutual learning on transnational level. And this is obviously also a very interesting job to have, because you really get to know and find out what's going on the ground. Now, do you also try to influence policy and legislative framework in your role?
We do also have a role in advocating also for the sector. And we do this on different levels. So we have people in our organization who are specifically focused on the European level. So they are working very closely with various European institutions. And then they would take messages coming from our members, and they would advocate for this, and they would lobby for this at the European institutions. But also on an international level, we have members, as I say, from around the world. So we're taking also these best practices, and then we take them, for example, to the UN, and then we can say, okay, this is a good way to go for the sector and for public transport. And this is, for example, contributing to reducing CO2 emissions in these cities. And this is something we can also learn about in other places in the world.
Okay, fantastic. So really fascinating job to have and work with every day. And I understand that the second thing that you do is you manage a Gecko project, which is an EU-funded Horizon 2020 project. Can you tell me a little bit about what are the aims of this project and what are its activities?
Sure. So another thing that we see, especially today in urban mobility, is there are a large number of new mobility technologies and solutions coming into cities, but cities sometimes struggle to keep up with these new technologies and solutions, or they struggle to set the right rules and context for this. Take, for an example, electric scooters, electric kick scooters, which are coming into the city. So a operator of this can put many hundreds of these scooters into a city. Many of us have seen these, but then the city has to set a kind of rules for this. How should these operate? And this project is basically trying to look at. Sure.
Sorry,
this project is basically.
I think we're having a little delay between in our conversation, but I'm just going to add the slides to the stream because they really illustrate very well what you're talking about. Please continue.
Yes. So here you see a number of various really future innovative transport solutions which are coming into our cities today. It could be electric scooters, it could be self-driving cars, it could be drones, it could be ride hailing such as Uber, for example. And cities sometimes struggle to keep up with these regulations, with these innovations, and they would like to better regulate this. So this project is giving recommendations and tools of how they can better make this regulation framework, basically, how they can set these rules for practice of these innovations. So we're trying to look at the gap between these solutions coming in and the city setting the rules and how we can speed up the meeting of the two, basically.
And this is a second image. This is what happens when there is no right regulation at the city level. Yes, this is super interesting. And I want to talk to you about how you actually built your skill set and your career to be able to manage this project. But before we do that, I have an interesting question from one of our listeners. So let's maybe take that. How do your members see the future of sustainable public transport to reduce the pollution levels in large cities like Brussels?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So if we look at public transport at the moment, one major aspect that we see at the moment is the electrification of our fleets. So we need to scale up clean transport solutions in cities. And this can be, for example, with electric buses, but also the complementarity of the public transport network with also innovative and alternative and new mobility solutions. For example, these electric kick scooters. So we need to have a well-integrated and connected network, which is clean, innovative, and also easily accessible for the public. So having your core network of public transport, but then having good infrastructure, which will then connect and where you can also integrate new mobility, for example, on the outsides of the city, which can then feed into the main public transport networks. And this together with the right planning for urban transport, clean mobility and accessible mobility, this will help us reduce pollution in cities.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Emily, for this question. And I have one more about public transport. So let's take it now before we discuss how you built up your career. On an international level, do approaches and opinions on public transport practices contrast or conflict greatly? Or do you find it is smooth to unite opinions?
That's a very interesting question. There are, of course, different variations in practices around the world. So as I say, we're an international association. So that brings together a wide variety of opinions. In Europe, we have this various innovations and technologies that we're looking at. But I gave the example of clean buses. Europe, we have already a number of clean buses, but if we would look to China, they have in some cities electrified completely their fleet already. And we're talking about thousands of electric buses in some cities in China. In other areas in the world, they could be using more informal transport. So where, three-wheel transports, rickshaws, and for example, in Latin America, there would be more emphasis, for example, on bus networks, but bus networks which almost run such as a metro line. So there's various solutions and various practices which different countries, different cities will then aim for and specialize in. And you can't always take one solution and just drop it into another context, because each place would have their own settings and their own context. But there is possibilities to learn from each other.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, for this great question. And now, Yannick, I want to talk to you about the ins and outs of your career. Well, first of all, this Gecko project is a Horizon 2020 project, which has a budget of 2 million euro. And as UITP is the lead partner, you are the responsible for this project. So what kind of skills, knowledge, and personal capacities does a person have to build up to be actually able to manage a 2 million euro EU-funded project?
Sure. Firstly, so in my role as coordinating this project, you are ultimately responsible for delivering this project to the best possible quality within that budget of 2 million euros, as you said. So not overspending the money, and also within the planning and within the time frame of the project also. So these are the key important things that you need to know when you're managing a project or you're coordinating a project. So related to that, things such as organization skills, attention to detail, especially when it comes to the finance, of course, budget planning, time management, these types of things are things that you need to implement basically while you're managing a project. But also, this is a project, as you say, of 2 million euros, and also 9 different organizations. So you need to be able to work with people, and you need to be able to manage sets of different organizations that you're working with. And also problems will come up. So sometimes, last year, of course, was a great example of a whole series of problems that you then need to deal with related to the pandemic. And you need to then discuss this with the different partners in the project and try to find also solutions that will fit different organizations, which is sometimes an area of compromise also.
Yeah. Okay. So a whole set of various skills, people skills, but also budgeting skills and organizational skills. So you kind of have to be a whole orchestra in one man. And tell me how you basically build yourself up to this level. What was your career path, and how you basically worked to have that skill set?
Sure. Well, I made first studies. This was a master's degree in urban sustainability. So that was basically setting the tone for the rest of what I was doing in my professional career then. From this, I was looking for work, basically, as a lot of people are doing. And I was trying to find opportunities to get started. And this happened with internships, temporary work. And then I did an internship in a place which represents cities. It's a European association. And this was mainly focused on environmental policy then. And I did this for 6 months was the internship. Little or hardly any pay from what I remember, or maybe even no pay it was. and then try to get from that some other opportunities, which is not always easy. But you basically try to capitalize on whatever that you can do at the time, make contacts, and then try to always build up experiences on your CV. This was the starting point.
Yeah, and how much would you say luck played a role in this, and just being like in the right place and in the right time?
It can be part of it, for sure. It was definitely part of this for me. After this internship, as I said, I was personally, I was going a lot between Belgium and the UK. I moved back to the UK, and I was looking for work. And then I made some contacts again with this association here in Brussels. Met up with the former manager that I had, and he mentioned to me that, listen, there is somebody taking some time off because she was going on maternity
leave. Yeah.
And there was a position coming up to replace her. So I eventually applied for this. I got the job. That was the first time period to cover her. She then came back, and then we had a certain period where we were working together. And then maybe luck or whatever, this was probably not luck from her side, but more from my side. It was probably more planned on her side, but she got pregnant for a second time, so I stayed on and then managed to continue the job basically for, I would say, enough time to sort of build up a real experience in the job at that time.
Yeah, and we were colleagues at the time. I mean, we started together as trainees, kind of lost in Brussels and not knowing what the future holds. And I do remember that it was not the easiest thing for you to sort of have this series of temporary contracts, because I imagine that this introduces quite a lot of uncertainty in your life. Would you say it was worth it now with the benefit of the hindsight?
It definitely did. It could be quite stressful at the time because, as I said, this was first a short-term contract. It could get extended. And then I received the news at some point that basically I will be extended again to cover a second maternity leave. And sometimes I would get the news about this contract literally a few days or a week or 2 weeks before the end of the contract. This short-term contract was coming to an end. So that did give some stressful times. Of course, you do look out for other opportunities while this is taking place. But looking back, I think sticking in there and hanging on at least to get that experience that I needed to kind of launch this further career and launch this work, I think it was worth it at the time in the end.
Yeah, so it's super important to jump at the opportunities that help us build up the skill set, because it does pay off, doesn't it?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so anyone who's watching, if you have any questions for Yannick, we will be wrapping up very soon. So ask now or forever hold your peace. And I wanted to ask you, because you also had some interesting reflections and experiences as well on how to work with strengths and weaknesses that one identifies in these early stages of the career.
Sure, yes. For example, some strengths. I mean, if you have experience that you're doing, for example, a thesis, or you do this kind of internships, try to capitalize on this. I would say, really, this is something that I think is very useful. Maybe try and discuss this with friends to kind of start a follow-up project. Try to use this as a starting point for further studies. Try to maybe write an article about this. So try and capitalize on what you have, but then also do some kind of reflection, I would say, internally. Look for where you are, either your strengths or your weaknesses, and try to map this out, I would say. I mean, for me, it was quite clear. I had part of my work covered because I did studies in urban sustainability, and this was something that I was using in my work, but I didn't plan on necessarily moving to Brussels and working within this European sector relates to European policy and so on. So this is something that I then identified. And I did an additional course related to this because I thought this would be useful to really go further and to have a good foundation in this sector.
Yeah, so you did a summer school, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this is also about continuing to build up the skill set after university. So just to complete the picture, so you did your master in London, you came to Brussels, you did first an internship and then a series of temporary contracts in Eurocities where we used to be colleagues. And then how did you arrive to where you are today? I think I'm missing a couple
Sure.
of steps.
Yes. So I stayed at Eurocities for, I think it was a few years. I mean, between 2 to 3 years, basically working there with these contracts. That came to an end also because some of the funding related to my position came to an end then. And then I was looking for a new job. And then I applied at where I am now, UITP. And I've been there now working for it's around 6 years now. And there I've been working on various different projects and also some different roles, and also basically progressing in my career there since then.
Okay. Well, this is really useful to get to know how one can turn a passion for an urban mobility and urban sustainability into an actually full-time job. And also for people who are looking today to build their career in nonprofit and impact sector, to know what they can do and how they can do it, and not to lose spirit alongside the internships and temporary contracts. It does come to an end. It does pay off. Thank you so much, Yannick, for joining us and for
Thank you
sharing
very
all these
much.
experiences. Yeah. And we will see you all next week again for the next episode of the Careers in Change Making. Oh, we have a very nice comment here from Rachel. Super interesting and great advice. Thank you. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of Careers in Change Making. And we are going to be looking into creative sector of filmmaking. And that's going to be Laura Bernard speaking to Emily Stoker. Thank you all for joining us and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.